Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's time for the Monday show, sponsored by Crown Trade and NordVPN. Newcastle have taken a huge step towards Champions League qualification after victory over Chelsea. The Magpies run out 2-0 winners at St James's Park in a game that was ugly, forgettable, but with a result that provides 3 crucial points. I'm Andrew Musgrove, joined as usual by Aaron Stokes. Aaron, welcome back. How are you doing? You well?
Yeah, you missed an adjective off that list of yesterday's game, and that I think was nervy. It was ugly and it was forgettable, but it was also, for large swathes of it, very nervy. And I'll admit, sitting there at half time thinking, Newcastle are a man up, they're a goal up, they're going to cruise through the second half, and they made us sweat. But thankfully, they capped off a lovely sunny weekend.
Yeah, I was a nervous wreck during that second half. I've got no fingernails left. I was kind of bent over as well, like resting my arms on my knees. I was just shaking back and forth. I was so nervous because it just felt like Chelsea were going to grab a leveler, which they would have deserved based on their second half performance. Thankfully, they didn't do, and thankfully Newcastle got that victory with huge 3 points in the race for Champions League football. So much to talk about in the next hour or so, but just some of your initial feelings over that victory yesterday.
Look, I think that we're going to dive into the performance and, maybe the fact Newcastle rode their luck a little bit and got a little bit lucky. But I think, bigger picture, zooming out, they've got a big win against the European chasing rival. And we were looking sort of through the permutations of what each result for Newcastle yesterday would have done in terms of the table. And if they had got beaten, I mean, they could probably have kissed goodbye at their Champions League hopes. I mean, that was on the basis that Forest were going to win. We all thought they would. They didn't, so that would have gone in their favour. But I think if Chelsea had won yesterday, with City the way they are, Newcastle going to Arsenal this weekend, it would have been a real struggle. And now, thankfully, they're in the driving seat for it.
I think you would have put a 6 in today.
Yeah, I think I would have. I don't think I would have liked to do a pod dissecting a defeat yesterday.
But you are here, and thank you to Newcastle United for making that possible. We should just kind of set out the table prior to the game because it was and remains so close. So you had Nottingham Forest in 7th on 61 points, and then they were to face Leicester after our game. Villa having beat Bournemouth, 6th on 63 points, same as Chelsea and Newcastle, and City on 65 in 3rd. Saturday's results, Villa winning, City drawing at Southampton, gave United, I felt, kind of two different focus points for Sunday. One was you have to take advantage of points dropped by City, and the other is like, alarm bells ringing, Villa are coming up behind us, so another reason that we have to win. And they did do.
Yeah, they did. And look, I think, I know we're going to get into a bit of detail, but I think Eddie Howe got it spot on. I know it wasn't pretty for the majority of the game, but it was a big call to go 3 at the back, and we don't know whether that was maybe injury led rather than tactically, but they went 3 at the back. Every man knew their job, and Enzo Maresca changed that Chelsea side around so much in game. He tinkered and really tried to make it hard for Newcastle with his formation switches, and Newcastle United stuck to their guns. And I thought defended really well, despite obviously giving away a couple of chances in the second half. As you say, what it does for the table is, it puts Newcastle in the box seat. They're going out to Arsenal with the win behind them. After Arsenal dropped more points, and look, I think second place again is back on the table.
It's been on the table for the last 3 or 4 weeks, and I maintain my optimism that they're going to get second that I put out there a few weeks ago. Got a bit of grief for it, but I tell you what, they beat Arsenal next weekend, and well, you guys can all join me on that journey to second. Let's start with the team news. No Kieran Trippier, no Joe Willock. It was a bit of a shock. Both are injured, and both may be out of the final 2 games of the season. But then to heap a little bit more chaos onto that was the change in formation. Now, it wasn't a change in formation to a brand new setup, not one that we've ever seen before, because we have seen it and it worked well against Arsenal. But to do it in such a big game looked like a risk, looked like a gamble, but thankfully it worked.
Yeah, I think it's easy in hindsight now to maybe look at Eddie Howe's press conference on Friday and think, well, it was clearly obvious something wasn't right. He wouldn't give anything away about what players were being assessed. He wanted to keep that under wraps. He gave very short, sharp, blunt answers to questions about Kieran Trippier and Fabian Schär's fitness after their sort of niggles and knocks at Brighton. As you mentioned, we didn't see Kieran Trippier coming in with the squad yesterday. We then didn't see Joe Willock. We then sort of got wind that it was 3 at the back. And yes, we've seen it before, but we've seen it again. We've seen it before at Arsenal when, it was a 2-legged tie. It was in the balance. Newcastle, sort of maybe had to play a little bit reserved. Yesterday, actually, at home with that crowd against a team that they needed to beat is probably not the ideal time to use it because, it's maybe not as attacking. But I thought they got it spot on. Botman came back. I know you only lasted 54 minutes and there's maybe a slight concern over him picking up another injury, but I thought for the best part, Botman looked like he hadn't been away. Dan Burn was deservedly man of the match. Fabian Schär did really well at marking Enzo Fernandez out the game. I thought everybody knew their duties. And yeah, look, people talk about Eddie Howe not having a plan B because he loves to stick to that 4-4-3, which has gone so well from the last couple of years. But I really like Newcastle when they play 3 at the back, and I think the players don't mind it either.
I think it really works against teams like Chelsea or an Arsenal, but it just didn't seem very Eddie Howe did it in such a big game. He's not usually one to change away from what he likes, and to do that in such a crucial game, it probably did look like a gamble and a bit of a risk before kickoff. Was there any word from Eddie Howe on why he did it? Was it because he'd lost Kieran Trippier to injury and Joe Willock, or was it simply because it was against Chelsea?
He was asked about it, but as far as I can remember, I don't think he answered the question. I think it was because of injuries, because I think if it had just been Kieran Trippier out, which we sort of suspected it might be in the week, you probably would have thought, well, okay, Emil Kraft's going to come in and Joe Willock can play in the centre if he's fit. Maybe the fact he's losing 2 of them, Sven Botman's fit and maybe eager to play, that's probably had a part to play with it. And the fact it's Chelsea and as you say, it probably works against teams like that. But when we asked Eddie Howe about it on Sunday after the game, he wasn't he didn't really give much away about why it was 3 rather than 4.
And on the injuries to Kieran Trippier and Joe Willock, it looks like there's a possibility that both might miss the last 2 games of the season. Just talk to us first about Kieran Trippier and then Joe Willock.
Yeah, so I mean, I think obviously that headline sounds much worse than it is. Out for the end of the season, we know obviously it's a really quick turnaround. They've only got 2 weeks to go. Eddie Howe did come out in his press conference and say that he doesn't think either is serious, which hopefully proves to be the case. Look, Kieran Trippier, we know, has been sort of playing through the pain the last couple of weeks. He's had niggles, he's had knocks, and it looks like that one at Brighton's maybe just pushing too far. The really frustrating one, I think, is for Joe Willock, because we've just spent the last 2 weeks talking about how he needs that run of games, he needs that confidence behind him. This is a perfect opportunity, 4 or 5 games left of the season, to really kick on and make his mark. And unfortunately, he's picked up another knock. It looks like in his thigh. Just really bad timing after what's been, really, really tricky season for him on a personal level. Your prediction that Joe Linton was magically going to come back into the team has obviously proved not to be right.
Did he give us hope?
Well, I think he's given a lot of people hope, because he's, in typical Howe fashion, he's been very vague about Joe Linton. And when we spoke to Eddie Howe on Friday, he said, "Oh well, he's back on Tyneside. He's been away. I know he did a media day with the players last week, so he's clearly closer than maybe we thought, because we did think he could potentially miss the end of the season." But I wouldn't like to make a.
It was the injections remark. I was like, he's probably tuned in, Eddie, as I know he does, right? And he's gone, I'm going to play him here. Going to make him think he's going to play some part. He actually was in the lift with Joe Linton before the game.
Yeah, he looked very, very dapper.
In the old granddad collar, Shearer shirt with his sunglasses on, the same sunglasses I think we all saw during the Carabao Cup celebrations.
Did you not ask him in the lift? Did you not say, Joe? I've been telling everyone on the podcast that you're coming back this
exactly
week.
what you're doing.
Why are you not in the match day?
You've only got 20 minutes to get changed, lad.
That's not the new kit, is it?
He's as big as he looks on TV, very broad shoulders, and I'm sure he enjoyed the game just as much as we did. But yeah, look, we were missing 2 key players, but we got through it. Now, on the formation itself, to me, it looked very fluid, especially in the first half. It didn't seem like there was a set man to drop in to the middle at times. Again, just my opinion, it looked like Tino Livramento was in the middle at one point. Dan Burn was going forward at another. Fabian Schär. It seemed very open to whoever wanted to kind of go forward, and the rest would then drop back and cover. It seemed to be any one of the back 5. When defending, it was man for man, and they did that very well. But you actually felt a little bit differently when you were watching the setup.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think going forward, it was really interesting in sort of the opening stages of the game to see Murphy essentially playing as a right winger when Newcastle had the ball, even though he was obviously meant to be playing a lot deeper. You've obviously mentioned Tino Livramento was moving into sort of a central role. Harvey Barnes, when Newcastle had the ball, was sort of playing as a second striker alongside Alexander Isak. These are positions that we don't usually see Livramento and Barnes in on a usual game. I was really, really impressed with how Newcastle set up defensively, because I think if you asked Eddie Howe what was the worst defensive performance of the season, he would probably put Stamford Bridge in the reverse fixture up there. Cole Palmer that day, I know it was probably when he was in his finest form of the season, but he absolutely ran them ragged, and he was dropping so far deep, and Fabian Schär and Dan Burn didn't know whether to stay or go. Yesterday, Dan Burn did not let him out of his sight. Whenever Palmer dropped deep, Burn went with him. Whenever Enzo went deep, Schär went with him, and it meant Botman was just one-on-one with Jackson in the centre, and you had Livramento and Murphy covering. I thought it worked perfectly. Whatever mistakes were made at Stamford Bridge were learned from and fixed yesterday, and I think it's no surprise Dan Burn got man of the match. I thought he marked Cole Palmer out the game, which was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, but he was absolutely superb. More on Dan Burn in a moment. We were concerned slightly about the early kickoff because it's not always appealing to fans. The club did give out a free bevy to those supporters who got it. I think it was just before 11 o'clock.
You had to, I think it was before 11. You had to redeem it before half 11.
Yeah.
So,
but they set the tone wonderfully. And we said in the build of this game, this is as close to a cup final as you can get. Now we've already won one of those. Don't forget. The display from War Flags was absolutely superb. Black and white wavers on the east stand. Very simple, but very effective. You then had a big flag on the Leazers, and then you had another kind of banner on the Gallagher. And now look, the East Stand comes in for a lot of stick, especially on social media, right? Sometimes unfairly. Yesterday, they had such a crucial role in setting the tone, and they did it because it looked superb. And I was watching the flags go up, and I was also an e-shot of the TV. I think it was maybe Darren Fletcher was the BT commentator.
Yeah.
And he said, it doesn't just look, it feels like a cup final here. And I think from that moment, a little bit like down at Wembley, when Newcastle United fans won the Battle of the Terraces right from the off, it's very hard if you're a player, especially coming to St James's Park and visiting, to kind of change that direction of the game even before the ball has been kicked.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of talk this week, hasn't there, about whether the kickoff was going to play a part, and some people saying it was too early. Eddie Howe even admitted on Friday that, I think for players and for managers, it's tricky playing that early because it sort of throws their preparation off. I agree with everything they said there. I thought the War Flags display was fantastic, as it always is. And I liked how early it started. The East Stand and the East Stand flags, the black and white thingy, was going about 10 minutes before kickoff. It built a really nice atmosphere. And I think the noise for Tenali's goal after a minute was something. It was an absolute roar. And I think that was both a mix of, one, how early it was, two, how crucial the goal is, what's at stake in the game, but also all those nerves about an early kickoff in Newcastle maybe not starting right was absolutely out the window. I thought they started so well.
Well, let's talk about this goal. 2 minutes on the clock. I absolutely love this goal. I love him. I might even change my name. I just think he's such a good player. He's definitely the best midfielder I've seen at Newcastle United. I'm going to go out there and say that. He's just superb. And what a goal this was as well. I mean, okay, it's a tap-in, but it's about how he wins the ball back.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And there's a big lesson as well, I think, for youngsters who watched this game and have watched the highlights. And it's very similar to play to the whistle, because Anthony Gordon goes down and in real time it looks like a penalty. Now, I haven't watched it back. It's a really good challenge from Casido, but players sometimes stop, get on the referee and appeal. But Tenali does not allow, I think it's Levia, the chance to turn, because actually if Chelsea get that space and time and he gets his head up and plays the right pass, Newcastle in a little bit of bother. Tenali's on him in an instant, wins the ball back, gives it to Bruno, puts it out to the right. Jacob Murphy with just the most delicious cross you will see. First time into the box, and Tenali with a little finish over the keeper. It just sums up Tenali for me. Great in the tackle, always switched on, always focused, endeavour, spirit, commitment, and then he knows where the goal is as well.
If anybody hasn't seen it again, it's worth watching the replay of how quickly Tenali gets to Lavia. And we're talking about a midfielder here who's meant to be Newcastle's last line of defence before the back four, and he is literally on Chelsea's own box, swarming their midfield and winning it. Eddie Howe was asked about Tenali and the goal after the game. He said it was an amazing piece of play from Sandro. His energy and legs have been a key part of our game. He used them mainly for his defensive work as he's changed position, but he's still got this natural ability to follow the play. He makes a lot of good forward runs. So when he gained the ball, he's on the end of another cross soon after. And that's the thing, isn't it? Not content with just winning it back, playing it to Bruno and then just admiring it. He's finding the run at the back stick. We may be debating the finish as to whether he maybe scuffs it a bit. He hits it in the ground, but
who cares?
Do we really care?
It's in the back
great
of the
start
net.
of the game. And also, I mean, is it too soon to say he's the best midfielder that I've ever seen in Newcastle? Maybe, but I'm also racking my brains and thinking, I don't know if I can name one.
Maybe that's one for a separate episode this summer, but he is
Get in the comments and let us know, though.
I love the fact that Newcastle United did a bit of a behind-the-scenes look with Tenali, did a day in the life of Tenali, followed him to training, then went home and talked about his life on Tyneside. And there's a moment where his fiance praises his English and says, I don't know how he's learned English this quickly. I've been studying for 10 years and I can't speak or understand like he does. And he said, yeah, but I don't understand Geordie.
Yeah.
And he goes, I need another 4 or 5 years. And there's a little wink at the camera. Think we can get that for another 4 or 5 years?
I think so.
Build a team around him, right?
Yeah. Well, of course you can. Yeah, he is generally a world-class midfielder. We've said it a lot on this podcast, but he really, really is. And I think it's hard to think that he's only really had one full season in the Prem, given his ban. So, and he's only he turned 25 this week?
Oh, he's young.
He's got years ahead of him.
Peter says, start a Sandro fan club. You know what? I might just do that. Gary says, Sandro is just something to watch. Pace, power. What a tactical brain he has. I love the guy. Definitely my favourite player at the club. First goal was always going to be important. So just tell us how important it was.
Yeah, look, huge. For the reasons we've just discussed, there was always going to be the nerves because of what was at stake in the game. We've seen Newcastle sort of struggle at home sometimes where they don't get an early goal and the crowd maybe gets on the back. I think, look, we saw 88 minutes yesterday where they had a 1-goal lead and we were all pretty nervous as to what was going to come. So it was really good to get that started. It killed any sort of early nerves that we had around the early kickoff. Chelsea on the back foot. I must say, I thought Chelsea, with 11 men and 10 men, played really well. And I think on another day, they probably would have snatched something because of how well they played. I thought with 10 men, they got it spot on and Newcastle really were under the cosh. But to start that well, to give the crowd a nice little early boost, it was absolutely massive. And unfortunately, they couldn't kick on as we thought they did, or they would when Jackson gets sent off.
I actually thought Newcastle looked the better side in the first half.
Yeah. I think the first 20, maybe the full first half, I thought they were.
Without really having any real chances, I still think they look like the side that we're going to add to the tally. I thought they were in relative control, and then it was, of course, helped by Jackson's sending off. And this is a really stupid red card. It's a shame he didn't watch the Aston Villa Bournemouth game the evening before, because I think the only reason Tyrone Mings got away with it was because he didn't take a little glance at him. Jackson looks at Botman and then elbows him into the face. Originally yellow, then upgraded to a red card. And I can't believe I'm going to say this for the second week in a row. All hail VAR.
Yeah, God, you changed your tune, haven't you? Usually the most ardent anti-VAR.
Isn't it nice? Isn't it nice to be sitting here and saying, at least from a Newcastle point of view, because if you're a Bournemouth fan, I can understand you're a little bit angry. But from a Newcastle point of view, second week in a row, VAR's done what it's there to do. It's done its purpose.
Yeah. Do you think there's any? I mean, we're going on a little bit of a tangent here, but is there any issue with VAR not saying to the referee that is a red card? Because for all we know, John Brooks could have gone to the monitor yesterday and said, no, I'm happy with my decision, which would have been the wrong call. So do you not want maybe VAR to go a little bit further? Or is the argument against that, well, we don't want them re-refereeing games? Was it the right call to send Brooks to the monitor?
Well, it was the right call to send Brooks to the monitor because it's a red card, and in real time,
but this is what I'm saying. We all know it's a red card. You only need to look at one replay to say it's a red card. Should VAR not be saying to John Brooks, you need to upgrade this? You don't even need to look at the monitor. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Well, it's difficult, isn't it? Because they want to be seen to be giving the referee that choice. I
Yeah.
think I agree, because it would just remove the rigmarole of watching the referee go over and coming to the decision that we all know is going to happen. But at the same time, I think they want to be seen to be given that choice. I'm sure something happened in the Fulham game where the referee didn't overturn his decision this weekend. Not exactly sure what happened, but it was mentioned on Match of the Day. So that's good, because it's up to the referee to change the decision. But it does annoy me when the referee goes to the monitor, and I think it was last week when someone goes, "Oh, we all know what this means," and it shouldn't be that. It should be up to the referee. And look, the referee's been given the chance to have a second glance at it, and he realizes he's made a mistake, and he comes to the right decision. But look, it's down to those. It's Stockley Park to be using this technology right, and I'm all for. If I never have to complain about VAR again, I'll be a very happy man.
You're not the only one that doesn't want to hear you complain. I get it every day in the office, ladies and gents. No, again, we're going on a tangent, and it's not that I disagree with. I thought VAR worked well in that instance. It was a clear red card. I'm yet to see a Chelsea fan, and even Maresca came out and said, you know,
it was interesting.
It was weird what he said, but I think on the whole, it was hard to sort of understand what he meant. But I think he was agreeing with it.
I don't think he was best pleased with Jackson.
He wasn't.
Clear frustration from the striker. But if you actually look at the stats, he'd won 2 out of 2 aerial duels. So although Botman and Cher and Byrne looked strong and they were doing well, it wasn't necessarily like Jackson was kind of marked out of the game. I think it was maybe more of a frustration how his own team were playing. And Danny Murphy mentioned this on Match of the Day as well. He felt that Chelsea didn't really have a plan before that sending off. Like, they were just lobbing the ball forward. There was too much space. They were seeming to be all over the place. So I think that was a sign of how frustrated Jackson was. But I think it was at his own team rather than Dan Burn or Botman or Cher, like, kind of dominating them. The second half, though, I mean, ironically, if he'd been on the pitch and Chelsea had played like that, the way they did in the second half, it would have suited them much better, because they were so much better. It was a painful watch from a Newcastle point of view at times. You could sense the nerves on and off the pitch. To me, it felt a little bit like a confused Newcastle United. They didn't quite know whether to try and go for a second or whether to sit back and absorb. And they did sit back and they got deeper and deeper. But every time they got the ball, there was some real kind of just punts up the field, which were going to nowhere. And they were just glad to get rid of the ball. I mean, there's just one moment when Murphy literally puts his ball through, and he should have been on St James's Park last weekend for the rugby. Goodness me, he was just happy to get the ball up, but it came straight back down. And it looked at times like Newcastle United were a little unsure of what they were to do. And to be fair, and it was like Newcastle had 10-minute times.
It was, and Enzo Maresca made a change at half time. He took Noni Madueke off, a right winger, and brought on Reece James at right back, which again just sort of lent to the theory that I was thinking that, okay, well, Chelsea are just going to sit back here and try and soak up pressure. They're going to go a bit more defensive. And instead, what happened was they went to like a 4-4-1 formation, Chelsea, and really, really confused Newcastle. And thankfully, now again, this might be to do with the fact Botman was icing something in half time, but thankfully it only took anyhow 9 minutes to make the change. Botman comes off, they go back to a back four, they throw Miley on, they give themselves an extra body in midfield because they were getting overrun by Lavia and Caicedo when he moved into the middle. I actually thought watching it, and I wrote a big piece on it this morning, I thought tactically it was a really entertaining game because Maresca made so many changes and Newcastle had to sort of react, even though they were the man with the man advantage. It was a really good Chelsea performance. But Botman coming off, Miley going into the middle. I thought Miley played well as Tenali Goal. It showed them up a little bit, but I think, Chelsea deserved at least a goal. Great save from Nick Pope to deny Cucurella. If that goal had went in, who knows how that game would have ended up.
A quick stat for you. In the first half, Newcastle made 252 passes to Chelsea's 190. In the second half, Newcastle made just 158 passes to Chelsea's 311. So there you can see that Chelsea dominance. Why do you think it was? Why do you think there was such a switch in the performance from the first to the second? And again, bearing in mind, Newcastle had the man advantage.
I don't know. It's hard to put your finger on it because usually Newcastle United at home with a goal advantage, with the momentum behind them, with a man advantage, that should be Newcastle out of sight. So I don't know why it was such a nervy performance. I think there was a nervy energy around St James's Park, which I don't think helped proceedings. Again, I think I'll point to the fact I thought Maresca played it well with how he was sort of switching Chelsea around. But I don't know. Eddie Howe, when asked sort of the question about whether the sending off changed the game, he said, I think it did. It was one of those games where it was always going to be tetchy because of what was at stake, the scoreline, the psychology of both teams, and the fact that Chelsea had nothing to lose in the second half. They played very well, I have to say. You could see their quality and the level of players they had, but they had nothing to lose and we had everything to lose.
Do you think that the instruction then was from Eddie Howe maybe to sit back a little bit?
But he goes on to suggest that that wasn't the case. You know, he was sort of asked in the press conference, you know, did you not go all out attack because, you know, you knew you could get caught? And he sort of said it wasn't really our intention not to attack. I think he would be disappointed with the performance. And I think, again, it's a hypothetical, but I think if Chelsea had equalised yesterday and we were sat here talking about a draw, we would be really laying into this Newcastle team. And I think just because Bruno's goal and the fact they won 2-0 and it looks comfortable maybe detract from the fact that they were, I'm not going to say poor, but they were the weaker team for the majority of that game. Do you get where I'm coming from?
I go back to what I said last week against the performance against Brighton, that if this game had taken place 3 or 4 months ago, or even 2 months ago, I would sit here and say I 100% agree with you.
Yeah.
But at this point in the season, it really
in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter. And again, you know, the first question you asked me today, what does it mean? Well, zooming out bigger picture, you know, they're probably now, touch wood, all being well, going to get Champions League football because of what happened at James's Park. So you can sort of take the performance out of it a little bit. But I must say, I thought for the bulk of the game, 10v11, Chelsea were far the better team.
We've got Peter saying, not sure why you boys were nervous. I never felt like they were going to score against us, as they are not a team, just a bunch of individuals. And we've got Trules answering the question rather that everyone's asking in the comments about Sven Botman. And Aaron's already alluded to it there. He was icing up his knee at half time. Anyhow, is hopeful it's nothing too serious. So hopefully we will see him against Arsenal. And we've got to kind of face in. Eddie Howe was just protecting the lead. Miley's sitting and tightening up the midfield anyway through the middle. And I suppose it's an interesting point there, isn't it, from Peter? Like, yes, we were nervous, but were we nervous because Chelsea really looked that threatening, or we were nervous again because of the bigger picture and what it would mean to drop 2 points?
Being sat there in St James's Park, felt nervous because I thought Chelsea were well on top. And there was this sort of weird energy swirling around the ground as if everybody sitting there thought, and I'm sure you'll agree with me sat in the stands, it looked like Chelsea were going to score. They had the sort of momentum behind them. They were forcing chances. Cucurella had a good save, and so did Enzo. Reece James obviously heads over right near the end after making a good run forward. So Chelsea did have chances to equalise, and I don't think it would have been unfair if they had. Thankfully, Newcastle defended well. I think we should probably point out at this point that Nick Pope's saves were crucial. I'm still on the fence about whether he actually got a touch to Enzo's, but the save from Cucurella was absolutely fantastic. But yeah, I think being there, I would describe it as a nervy afternoon.
A little reminder from Nick Pope that maybe Newcastle don't need a new goalkeeper this summer.
Yeah, look, I think since coming back into the team, and look, I'll hold my hands up. At the time, I thought Dubravka deserved the chance to stay in, but I think it's hard to really, definitively say on more than a couple of occasions that Nick Pope's not deserved his place back. I thought he's done well. I thought he played really well Saturday. He looked slightly better with his feet. He commanded the area in the first half, and he made some big saves at big points of the game in the second. So yeah, he had a good performance yesterday, and what it does for the summer, because there's so much talk about a new goalkeeper and him being replaced. He is essentially playing for his future at the minute, and he's not doing too badly.
So some praise there for the change Eddie Howe made where Botman came off and Miley came on. But actually, I think the bigger praise goes for the decision to bring Emil Kraft on for Anthony Gordon, which happened in 65 minutes. It was a real key point of the game for me because Newcastle were being targeted down their right-hand side. They were really struggling. And from my vantage point, you could see fans to the left of the dugout standing up and gesturing towards the dugout and saying, look, this is where Chelsea are attacking us. And every time they're getting down their left-hand side and they are getting the better of Jacob Murphy. And it even seemed at one point Jacob Murphy was saying to the bench, you've got to do something here because I'm struggling. And then Emil Kraft comes on to shore up the defence. And I thought he did well. I thought that was a real important moment by Eddie Howe. Yeah,
it was. I think Jacob Murphy, when he is playing right wing back, needs to be in a back five or, the the wing back with 3 defenders. I think as soon as they went to 4 at the back, he didn't look as comfortable. I also noticed midway through the second half when Chelsea were having a lot of the ball, Newcastle, to their credit, were trying to press them really quickly. But Tyndall and Howe kept shouting to Anthony Gordon to press higher up the pitch. Reece James was having too much time and space on the ball. So I think that also went into their decision to bring Kraft on. I mean, there's a lot of praise for Kraft on social media, and rightly so. I thought he came on and did really well. I think the general consensus is that he played well. And as you say, it was a really smart decision by Howe. And again, it just reaffirms, I thought yesterday, Howe himself got it spot on with his tactics.
It's those kind of in-game moments. It's a simple decision, really, because, yeah, okay, they're hitting us down this side. We need to do something about it. He's a proper right back. Murphy's not. It seems very simple, but it's those moments that win you games, those in-game management decisions which are so vital.
Yeah, and as you say, it wasn't just Eddie Howe that noticed it. People in the fans were noticing it. People in the stands were noticing it. And the players too will have obviously been noticing that Chelsea were probably getting a little bit more joy down the left-hand side than they should have been. And thankfully, it didn't come back to bite Newcastle.
And a big shout out to Emil Kraft as well. Running over, telling Kukurea what he thought of him. I think everyone probably could agree with his words on him, that he had Bruno's back because Bruno just won a foul. There was a proper undercurrent, wasn't there? Especially in the second half. A bit of nastiness in this game. Got very feisty. Do you think that was a sign of what was really kind of up here? It was about the Champions League, and that was getting into the players' heads, and that's why it was so feisty.
Yeah, I mean, as you touched on, it was a proper cup final atmosphere, wasn't it? And it was two teams that, Eddie Howe said that, Chelsea had nothing to lose, but Newcastle had a lot to lose as well. But I actually think, I agree, the second half was very feisty, and there was some big tackles flying in and challenges, and I'm not surprised that the referee dished out 6 yellows and a red. But I even thought in the first half, how many times was Caicedo right up Anthony Gordon and fouling him? How many times were Bruno and Tenali flying into tackles? I thought it was just a really good physical game throughout.
Caicedo was angry quite a few times in the first half, and I was like, why is the referee not booking for dissent? Because he was literally throwing his arms everywhere. I'm just get him booked, man. And that would give Anthony Gordon a chance to get him a second yellow. Newcastle, for all of Chelsea's dominance in the second half, did have a few chances. There was a moment Barnes was played down the left side. And on Barnes, again, I thought, without him actually getting an assist or a goal, I thought he was superior again. He was really busy, especially in the first half. He looked really, really threatening. But it was just that moment in the second half when he's played in, the touch lets him down. There was a few kind of moments like that, not just him, but more him often than not, where you just think on another day he's gotten himself a goal or two here. And I just thought he was getting in all the right positions. He was looking purposeful. I just thought it was another good outing from him.
He looked busy. Newcastle didn't have too many chances in that first half after the goal, and he had 2 of them. He obviously forced the corner down the right, and he also sort of trickled one towards goal's left, as you say, that second half. That was a lovely bit of move as well from Tenali, Bruno, Livramento on the edge of the box. Barnes gets played in brilliantly. It's a shocker of a touch, to be fair, but a great move. But yeah, it just didn't come off from yesterday. But I think he'll be happy with his performance yesterday.
And then Bruno, played in by Jacob Murphy with the pass, I would say, of the game, over the top of the defender.
Saw the headlines.
Oh my God! All guts, no glory.
Yeah.
High. Wide into the Gallagher.
Blasted into the Gallagher.
Oh, do you know what? If you could have seen me, do you remember the highlights of 4-3 Newcastle Liverpool, and Kevin Keegan hangs his head over the advertising
Was that
board?
you?
That was me on my mate. I was like, oh no, cool head, Bruno. Just take your time. You're right. You saw the headlines, and it was at that moment I thought,
it's going to come back to bite them. Well, it was at such a crucial point in the game, and it was at such a point in the game where Chelsea were really on top. So when Murphy played him through and Newcastle had sort of a rare chance to actually extend the lead, he just got a little excited, didn't he? Bless him.
But I tell you what, these are the games and the moments where Bruno just comes into his own. He seems to live for these big moments. He wins a free kick. There's a bit of coming together, as we've discussed. But first off, let's talk about Big Dan Burn, because this leads to Bruno's goal. Dan Burn gets the assist. And if you haven't seen it already, go back and watch Match of the Day. I'm sure it's on Newcastle United's official highlights as well. But Big Dan Burn is pictured, how shall we say, politely.
You just say it.
I can't say. I haven't got my beep machine with us. Politely requesting Tenali to
give me the ball.
Yeah. So he's big arms in the air, He's unmarked right. He's the last man on the pitch towards the left-hand side, and he is shouting, "Give me the ball." Tenali obliges, put the ball over to Big Dan Burn, who brings it down with a wonderful first touch. Lays it off to Bruno, who moves inside, fires home via deflection. But first off, Dan Burn, that passion, that performance, you already mentioned it, man of the match, but what a first touch.
Yeah, it was fantastic. It's a good job Tenali's missus can't understand English too well, because I don't think she'd be too happy with Burn talking to Orsandro like that. But yeah, look, Burn was, I mean, it's already been said, but he was an absolute colossus yesterday. I thought he was fantastic. He had the hardest job on the pitch against Cole Palmer, who was changing positions and dropping deep and moving down the flanks, and he stuck to the task so brilliantly. He was throwing himself in there like Kraft was, trying to, get in the faces of Chelsea players, but doing it in the right way. He was the first over to try and get Jackson sent off, just showing that leadership. And then he goes up the other end and helps in an attacking sense as well. It was a perfect performance from him. And look, I mean, what a fairy tale season he's had, and it just keeps getting better and better.
Well, let's hear from Eddie Howe, because he was asked about Dan Burn's performance, and this is what he had to say.
Yeah, I thought Dan had a really strong game. The thing I love about Dan is his fearlessness when he plays. He's very aggressive. I mean, he's very good, obviously, aerially, but on the floor, I think he's been magnificent for us this year in terms of covering ground. And it's not easy to do what we ask of him and Fabi, but I thought they executed it really well today. I think we have to be adaptable. The way the game's going and it constantly changes, your players need to be adaptable, even in running. I thought we were today, and that helped us win.
So there we go. And anyhow, praising Dan Burn's ability on the floor. A little bit like Andy Cowell, I guess, because everyone thought he only got it in the air, but he was actually quite decent with the ball at his feet. But Dan Burn, he does get a little bit of criticism sometimes, and I think sometimes Newcastle's weak link is maybe, or especially when it was Dan Burn and Lewis Hall, you left questioning why opposition teams don't close down that space where Dan Burn gets the ball, he turns to the left and plays into the left back. But you know what? He can pick a pass. There was a few moments yesterday when he was pinging some balls over the top.
I think that's what a couple of years alongside Fabian Schär probably did. Yeah, he's definitely picked up some tips. No, look, it was a great performance. I'm absolutely delighted for him, and I think it was probably 4 or 5 he could have picked out yesterday in terms of being top. In terms of performance, but I think Burn stood above them all.
He had that moment where he won a challenge down at the Leazer's end and
Humped
got up and celebrated,
Bruno, didn't he? Yeah.
Like he did against PSG. Remember back then when he got a wonderful challenge, and absolutely loving it, living the Geordie dream. And interestingly, we've got an end of season pullout that will be coming out at the end of the season. Funnily enough, and I'm going to write a piece. Kind of, I haven't quite nailed the headline down yet, but it's kind of those players who he didn't expect to impress this season. So when Dan Burn signed that extension, he said, "I'm not here just to make up the numbers. I'm coming out and I'm going to have a place in that first team." And I thought, good on him, good to have that ambition. I just can't see it. I didn't think it was going to happen, but goodness me, you ask me if I've been shared Dan Burn, I'm going Dan Burn all day long. So he's one of them that's going to get on the list because he has surprised me this season. He's been absolutely fantastic.
And I think, but you look again, just to go back to last summer, Newcastle threw all their eggs in one basket, and that was let's sign a centre back. It didn't happen, and look, they're on the cusp of finishing second in the Premier League with Fabian Schär and Dan Burn. What an absolutely amazing story!
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. Let's talk about Bruno then, and this goal. Drops his shoulder, picks his spot. Gets lucky with a deflection. In an interview, he said didn't take much of a deflection. Ends up in the back of the net. He's off to the corner. Steals Tino Aspria's celebration with a corner flag raised in the air. But as I said there before, it just seems like when you need your captain to rise to the occasion, Bruno, he might go missing sometimes in games and in lesser games, which isn't always brilliant. But I tell you what, when you need to win a game and you need to release all that nervous energy, you need your big players to step up, and that's exactly what he did yesterday with that goal.
Yeah, I thought it was a good performance yesterday from him on and off the ball. Not an easy afternoon against some really, really talented Chelsea midfielders who were sort of interchanging every 5-10 minutes. He came out afterward and spoke to the press and said that he gave sort of a team talk to the boys in the dressing room before. So he's clearly shown that leadership away from the pitch as well. We were talking off air, weren't we, about the fact he maybe got a little bit lucky not to get sent off. He maybe channeled that energy.
I've got to be honest. Prior to him scoring the goal, I thought he was going to see red because there was a bit of coming together with Enzo in the box. that good old South American relationship coming to the front, and it was continuing afterwards. They were pointing very vigorously at one another. I'd love to know what they were saying, or maybe given we're a family show, I wouldn't. And then what I love the most about it, because we often say that kind of S-housery is missing from this Newcastle side. It was there a couple of years ago. He's celebrated like there's no tomorrow. He's put the corner flag back into its spot. He runs back to the centre circle and just turns around and blows Enzo a little kiss. And I thought, Bruno, goodness me.
Somebody thankfully's clipped it up and put it on social media. So if you haven't seen it, it is out there. It is brilliant.
But I do fear sometimes that he will lose his head. And you could see there was a moment after that coming together in the box where him and Enzo are running around trying to kick each other. And then he ends up getting booked for a really silly foul, does Bruno. And it's happened in other games where you go, oh my God. And I'm thinking, what you need is the captain to come and calm you down. And you're the captain. But I'm also coming to the realization, a bit like Joe Linton, that this is just his game. If you try and take that out of his game, he's going to be less of a player. So just accept it, get on with it, keep everything crossed that he gets yellow and doesn't get anything more, but just accept that this is Bruno at his best.
They do toe the line. I mean, Joe Linton and Bruno, they're very sneaky with how they do it, but for how brutal they are on and off the ball at times, they get away with it. And I thought Bruno got away with it yesterday. Maybe not so much as he got away with it with Arsenal in that famous game at St James Park a couple of years ago, but I thought he channeled it well yesterday. He knew the line, he didn't cross it. He was very, very close to it at times. But you sort of need players to play on the edge. And as you say, I think that is just Bruno's game. And if you take that away, it's not the Bruno we love.
Yeah, just had there some comments from Les and a few others saying Ancelotti confirmed as Brazilian manager. So
there we go.
Joe Linton and Bruno will have a new manager to play with. Just talk to us about your relief when that goal goes in.
Yeah, it was a relief. That was the overriding feeling. Relief not just because of what it meant yesterday and the fact Chelsea were done and it was game over, but also just a relief because I, did have visions of having to call in sick today and not want to talk about the fact Newcastle had dropped to 6th or 7th or whatever it would have been if results had gone the other way. I know they're not there yet, but it just looks like, they are so close to it now. And I think they go to Arsenal now full of confidence. They can go to the Emirates and get another win easy.
I had a range of emotions, and I've got to apologise to my friend who I sat next to, because when that goal went in, I jumped up. I was jumping all over him, very, very happy and excited, forgetting that he'd just come back from a hernia operation where he's not allowed to do any heavy lifting. And I'm carrying a bit of timber, ladies and gents. He's not allowed to even drive. I totally neglected that as I was jumping around like a lunatic. And in my head, I was thinking, why is he not celebrating? Oh, yes. So I apologise to my pal that I nearly put you back into the hospital. And then I sat down and I just, kind of like, again, after the cup, felt like I'd run a marathon. I was just like, oh my God. Like,
you weren't tearing up, were you? Like,
no, but I was like, I was just so relieved. And like, it was such a big moment because it feels like we're just about there. And look, it's still so tight. Lose against Arsenal, you go into that game against Everton, and goodness me, I'm going to be even more nervous than I was on Sunday. But the relief when that ball hit the back of the net, it's hard to describe really the range of emotions you go through. Anyhow, during his press conference, interestingly spoke about the summer to come, because obviously we're all focusing on getting to the Champions League. And what does that mean? And we have to get there first. I mean, the current table is Newcastle in 3rd on 66, City 4th on 65, Chelsea 5th on 63, Villa, of course, 6th on 63, Arsenal 2nd in 68. So let's assume Newcastle United get there, because essentially one win does it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and we come against Arsenal?
Yes.
I think so as well. So then that leads on to Eddie Howe and what he reckons is going to happen in the summer. Now, this question was based around the fact, of course, Kieran Trippier and Joe Willock were missing and the squad is stretched. And it led Eddie Howe onto this. And it was just kind of a 3-4 word answer towards the end of this clip, but really interesting. So I'll play the clip and then we'll get Aaron's view on it.
Yeah, I think we're missing some big players. And I think whenever you do that, there's a gap. Now, I think we've done really well. The lads that came in today did really well. They filled that gap superbly, and that's, of course, from my perspective, what you're looking for: people to step up and show their qualities. And when you're bringing players like Sven Botman and Anthony Gordon into the team, they're top-class players, and I thought they both played well today. But below that, of course. Now we're slightly stretched, and we see if we can get a couple of players back. But of course, the summer window, as we know, and I've made no hiding of the fact it's a big window for us.
It's just that last bit there. I've made no fact, no hiding. It's a big window for us. What does that look like, Aaron, do you think?
Well, it has to be bigger than the last 3 consecutive windows put together, really. Look, I think there's a couple of reasons why whatever happens in the next couple of weeks, we know it is going to be a big window for Newcastle United. Let's say, the worst happens and they don't finish in the Champions League. We know they're going to be playing European football. They have learnt the lessons of last season when they had 4 competitions to fight for, but they also had a really, really poor season with injuries. James Bunce obviously came in and the medical team sort of put that right. But then obviously we know, as I've just mentioned, 3 consecutive windows without strengthening that first team. Even if you throw Kieran Trippier and Joe Willock back into that squad yesterday, that it's a stretch squad. It is devoid of, I'm not going to say quality, but fresh faces, fresh blood, just to give them a lift like it did when Tenali and Tino and Lewis Hall came in. Again, every week we talk about there's positions in that team that need strengthened. Right wing, they probably need another defender. Is Alexander Isak carrying too much of the load? Possibly. So, as I say, I think whatever happens, because we know Newcastle are going to be back in Europe and Eddie Howe wants a big squad, and it looks like, the PSR concerns have gone away, at least in the short term. I think, it is going to be a big summer for them.
Interesting that he mentions it, do you think?
The question sort of led him to it, because I'm not sure if the question was on there, but the question was sort of, does the fact that your squad is thin and every sort of week at this rate, does it sort of reaffirm that it needs to be strengthened this summer? And Eddie Howe sort of, he didn't answer that bit until the very end of the answer, but he got asked a similar question on Friday morning at the pre-match press conference, where he was asked essentially about, does qualifying for the Champions League mean you can target Champions League players? And he sort of came out and said, well, look, even if we don't get the Champions League, we are going to be targeting a really small pool of players of that quality, like every other Premier League team at the top is going to. So I think Eddie Howe already and Paul Mitchell will be planning for, that eventuality with hopefully a big summer to come.
And we hope, and we think, and we understand everyone is on the same hymn sheet when it comes to the summer. Like, Eddie Howe's not saying that because he's sending a warning out to those above him. Everyone understands how crucial this summer is. He needs players to build a squad.
Yeah, 100%. I think everybody in the club knows that. I don't think there's anybody burying their head in the sand that, well, they're going to finish, second or third potentially. Let's just keep the squad together. We know that, everybody at the club feels like the last couple of windows has been hard on Eddie Howe, and obviously their hands have been tied. We all know that. But I think now Paul Mitchell has had a year to settle in. That will do them great favours. Mitchell's even came out on the record publicly and said coming in last July, halfway through a transfer window, was not ideal for him. He will want his own structure in place, and thankfully he's had a year to, build up the type of player he wants in tandem with Howe, so that everybody's on the same page.
Another assist for Brian Mbeumo over the weekend. I mean, he's got to be the top priority, hasn't he?
Yeah, look, I think he looks absolutely super. I think it's a foregone conclusion. He leaves. When you factor in his comments, Tom Frank obviously said the other week that Brentford are a selling club. His own captain came out and said, we think he's going to leave. The only question now that arises is who gets him. And I think Newcastle United are going to be there, but I think Manchester United and other clubs will be. But he just ticks a lot of boxes, doesn't he?
Ollie Watkins also linked by certain outlets to Newcastle United.
Really? I haven't seen that.
Would you take that? I mean, that would be quite interesting. Him and Isak, but I'm not sure you would go from one side sideways, not first choice, to another side.
He's just came out and did a very big interview, didn't he, after Villa beat Newcastle a couple of weeks ago, where he said he doesn't want to be second choice to Marcus Rashford. So I'm not too sure how happy he would be playing second fill at Newcastle.
Interesting, though. It's taken us 45 minutes to mention Alexander Isak.
Yeah, well, exactly that. Does that maybe say something?
He cut a frustrated figure again, didn't he?
Yeah, I'm sort of really hoping that you don't ask me the question you've probably asked me for the last 3 weeks. Why is it not going right for him? Because I don't know. Because I've said in the last couple of weeks, well, does he look like he's maybe carrying it something? Yesterday, I didn't think he did. He was full of running. He was pressing. He was keen. He was, getting in good positions. It just wouldn't fall for him. He sort of volleyed a ball over the bar when he hit it in the ground really poorly, wasted another opportunity soon after. It's just not going for him. And unfortunately, for whatever reason, don't ask us because I don't know. he looks like a player that maybe just wants the end of the season to come.
He had 2 or 3 half chances
Yeah.
yesterday where you think Isaac of a few months ago, that's going in the back of the net. And we have to just hope and keep everything crossed.
They weren't clear-cut chances, though. That's the only sort of silver lining.
They weren't, but
he did still snatch at them, I
Yeah.
think. But
it'll click against Arsenal, won't it?
Yeah, he loves
but a lot of
scoring
people joking that actually it's all on purpose. So no clubs come in this summer and buy him. We also had Jamal Lascelles back on the bench.
Yeah, very good to see. His first time in the squad for well over a year. He's been training really well the last couple of weeks, so great to see him back in the bench. Yeah, we thought we might not see him again this season. I think the fact that Kieran Trippier just adds to the defensive frailties at the minute probably made him back in the squad. But yeah, great to see him back. Really good to see him back.
And Gary says Mitchell on the board and how we've already got their budgets and targets. It wouldn't surprise me if a couple of possible deals are all but done. 4 or 5 players in with maybe 3 out. We would like to see them done as soon as possible. We know there's 2 separate transfer windows. It might be a push to get them in those first 10 days. But we want early business done, don't we?
Yeah, we all do. Obviously, Eddie Howe, every single summer when we speak to him about it, says the same thing, and that's he wants the squad put together well before they go with pre-season. Obviously, in the last couple of windows, that hasn't happened. But Newcastle last year moved pretty quick. I know it was only Lloyd Kelly, but they got that deal done quick. They wanted Tosin done quick as well. So yeah, hopefully, with the double transfer window this year, obviously it opens June 1st, 10th. Gives them a good chance, and crucially, I know Newcastle aren't in this bracket, but clubs are going to want to sell in that window because of obviously PSR. Eddie Howe said a couple of weeks ago, we want to be taking advantage of that and making sure if teams are selling and it's a deal that works for us, we get it done. Which hints that maybe by the 10th of June we might see 1 or 2. Hopefully.
We mentioned Ollie Watkins, and it looks like Aston Villa, especially if they miss out on the Champions League, are going to be one of those sides like Newcastle were last June. We're going to have to sell at least one of their stars. And Jacob Ramsey is the name who has been linked. Someone I mentioned last summer, actually. I think he's a very talented player, good age. Lost his head a little bit against Bournemouth and ended up getting sent off for a stupid double yellow. But that aside, would he be someone you could see fitting into this Newcastle United side?
Yeah, he fits the profile. And I know he's been linked in recent weeks, but he was actually really, really heavily linked last summer as well. Newcastle have had their eye on him for a while. Interesting that he's sort of more of like a central midfield figure or sort of an attacking midfielder rather than
versatile, though, isn't he?
Yeah, rather than a wide man. But it goes to suggest that maybe Newcastle are going to strengthen in that position. Look, I think he's a really good player, really talented, young, good profile, international experience at under-21 level. He ticks a lot of boxes.
It certainly does. Got Truls here saying, with UEFA Champions League, I don't want the lap or dibbling. We need ready players for that, not maybe players. Bit harsh.
A little bit, because I mean, was Tino Livramento a ready Champions League player 2 years ago? No,
was Lewis Hall. But then they did take a little bit of time to get up to scratch.
Yeah, I understand it, but ready-made Champions League players don't grow on trees, and they cost a lot of money.
Dean says, who do you see leaving in the summer, and what do you make of Arteta's comments and that he hasn't been beat this season off a top 6 side? So do the first question first. Who do you see leaving this summer?
I think there'll be big changes in the goalkeeping department. I think Odysseus Vlachodimos, to a surprise of absolutely nobody, will go. Very, very interesting to see John Ruddy on the bench again yesterday. I think Vlachodimos goes. Dubravka could go if there's still that Saudi interest. I think in terms of outfield players, it wouldn't surprise me if Matt Targett maybe goes. Harrison Ashby's come back from loan, but I suspect he will probably go again. In terms of the bigger players, and by that, players that might get you a bit of money, I hate to say it, but Sean Longstaff, I think, probably has come to the end of his time. If he wants to go, he's got 12 months left on his deal. He very well might say, I'm going to play Champions League football, or still be around the squad, and then consider my options. I hate to say it, but maybe Joe Willock, if the right offer comes in. You spoke last week of Crystal Palace being in for him. But I think, thankfully, this summer we aren't going to see any or a lot less of the talk about, is Bruno going to go for 100 million? Is somebody going to swoop in for Alexander Isak? Is Anthony Gordon going to go to Liverpool? Newcastle are obviously in such a healthier financial situation that is obviously going to take the pressure off any big outlets like that.
Yeah, I think Sean Longstaff's pretty much nailed on, isn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, Penny Fizz thoughts yesterday when Miley gets on in place of him. He's nowhere near the first team, is he?
Oh,
So it'll be interesting to see where he goes and how much money Newcastle will get from him.
Yeah, and on the second point of the question, I have seen Arteta's quotes. To put in a context, he said, I've got them here. He said when drawn with Liverpool and being asked about the Newcastle game, he said, against the top six, I think we haven't lost any single game. So that tells you as a team we are very, very consistent. I'm guessing he must mean the big six: Man U, Tottenham, Chelsea, Liverpool, City.
Oh, no, we did
because
beat them.
Because we are in the top six of the Premier League. So that look, I don't know. Maybe he's just losing his head because it's been a horrendous couple of weeks for them.
This has been a season where he said some daft things as Mikel Arteta. The ball
was still. I don't think the ball will ever be topped. To be fair,
I love the fact as well. And we're getting away from it, but I watched his post match interview against Liverpool, and the one of the questions was, what did you say in the dressing room to your players at half time? He said, what I said remain in the dressing room. I thought, will it? Because I've seen a clip of you in the dressing room talking about a light bulb.
I know, right?
You get a light bulb out your pocket and say that.
Amazon Prime mustn't have their cameras in the dressing room yesterday. So.
And what was it he said last week? We're the best team in the Champions League.
Yeah, the best team in the Champions League got knocked out. Yeah.
I can't wait for Sunday. I cannot wait. We had Marley actually who emailed in here to say about targets changing because of the Champions League, but you've answered that one, Aaron. So there you go. Steve has emailed in though and says, Andrew, last week you mentioned that Crystal Palace were after Joe Willock. Do you think a swap deal plus cash for either Guy or Eze could be worked out? I don't think so. I think for both clubs in the world of PSR, they'd want a full transfer fee. I mean, to split that between player and cash.
Eze would have to be.
Eze's worth at least double, if not treble.
A lot of money, isn't he? So,
I mean, what are you going to get for Joe Willock? Again, he's injured, so that doesn't look too good. I don't think you're going to get more than 20 million for Joe Willock.
You do see swap deals these days, but they're a lot less regular than the way. And you usually see them when there's two clubs really need a little PSR boost.
But we saw that the Forest deal, where 35 million for Elliot Anderson and believed to be a huge fee for Black Demos. So there was no swap deal in terms of player and less cash. So I can't see that happening because teams need that money on the books to beat PSR. So unfortunately, I don't think Newcastle United are going to be able to offer cash plus player for either one of those players. Although I do think they will go back in for Mark Guy this summer. I think they stand a good chance, especially if Palace don't win the FA Cup. And Taylor has wrote in and asks about the change of badge. And they say, I'm torn. I don't want to lose our history and heritage, but how big of a deal do you really think it is?
When I first heard the news last week that they were going to be announcing a badge change, I was like many fans, quite confused, quite frustrated. Didn't think it needed to happen. After listening to the club explain it, after listening to some sort of well-placed people who know all about badges and crests, it does generally seem like it needs to be done. Newcastle say that their current badge is far too intricate to be, used wide scale en masse, which I understand. I'm pretty sure Manchester United, Liverpool and Newcastle are the only three clubs that haven't changed their badge this millennium.
But Liverpool have. They've still used their old badge. Yeah. But Liverpool have done. So people who are against the badge change can't use that.
So, but what I'm saying is, clubs are changing the badges in the last 30 years because, they need to transition to a digital badge that's going to be, widely accessible around the world. Look, it's not going to be popular because it's a big change, but at the end of the day, I'm not really too fussed.
I think it's really interesting, isn't it? Because for our generation, it's all we've known.
But when you look back at the history, it's changed, 5 times since the 60s?
Yeah, it changed 3 times in 14 years or something. And I was speaking to my uncle yesterday at the game. I said, what was it like when it changed to this one? And he said, we literally picked up the Chronicle and there it was. And then we got on with it.
Yeah.
I think social media and X gives you a totally different barometer to measure things by. The reaction has been really interesting. Looking at the survey, I can understand there's a little bit of anger at the questions.
It's a weighted survey,
yes.
Isn't it? It's not saying, do you want to change the badge? It's, but look, I think it's good that Newcastle are consulting fans. I know they have to because of the FA laws that are in place, but, it does seem like they're going to take fan consultation on board before coming up with a final offering.
I think it'll be a circle design. And I'm up for changing it. Like, I think it's really difficult because it is your history and it is your heritage, but it's getting that balance, isn't it? It's getting that balance of a successful club on and off the pitch, but also accepting the changes that need to come to get there, like a new ground, like a modernisation of the badge. And look, as long as that badge keeps some of the history and heritage of this great club, which it will do, because the club would be daft to totally change it. And their press release said minimal, refine and revive. And they're not going to go too far from what it's like. I'm all for that. And interesting, I don't know if you saw on social media, a lot of people pinpointing how City's badge is then used in their two feeder clubs, the New York team and the Melbourne team, I think it is. Very similar badges, but what that does is when you see that badge, you go, oh,
it's the City group.
Very difficult to replicate that to a Newcastle feeder club because it's so unique. And that's obviously a selling point to the badge. But look, if you want to hit the highs of the financial world, and it feels dirty saying that sometimes, doesn't it? Because we want to love football for what it is, the emotion that we felt yesterday and the relief. Sorry to my friend for his hernia. But you've got to accept that these changes have to happen. Unfortunately, football is built on money, and these things, help you get there.
Yeah, it's not just football clubs, not to obviously get down a really boring rabbit hole, but look at companies over the years who have done it. I was looking last week for a piece I was writing on the badge, and you look at Burger King and Pringles and Lay's, and all these companies have done it in the last 20 years. So it's not restricted to football. My only real overriding huge feeling about it is just don't make it like Leeds United's in 2018.
That's not going to happen.
Exactly. That's my only condition.
Imagine just that, just a picture of Bruno's face.
Yeah. In the chest.
I've seen some strange ones. I've seen like in NFC when
I've seen this is another horrendous thing about social media. I've seen so many designs not mocked up. And if you're one of these people, I'm really sorry, but they're all awful from what I've seen. Let the clubs, brand department sort it. We don't need you to be mocking up badges.
There was one post on a fan group on Facebook, and bearing in mind basically the club's reasoning for doing it is that this one's too complicated. And this guy put it on. I've just been messing around. Here's 4 or 5 designs I've come up with, and every single one was more complicated than the
10
one we've got. 10
seagulls, 5 magpies.
Exactly. And I was like, no, right, I'm not going to get involved in this. But also the leaked one from my neighbours down the road, Newcastle World, have had a story about it. The leaked badge that they've seen. I mean, I hope to high heaven it's not that one.
Well, that again, taking aside from how bad it looks just as complicated.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know.
So we will wait and see. I think, if anything, it'll be like the one that they had in the early 80s.
Yeah, which is actually, I think, probably one of my favourites as well. So
there we go. Let us know in the comments what you think. And actually, the kind of phrase I think sums it up perfectly here. We had a new badge every 7 years, 3 times. Things change over time. Accept it and move forward.
Exactly.
And Roger says, we'll always be Newcastle United.
Exactly.
Although Niall isn't too keen on it and says the next thing will be a name change. That's a little bit daft, Niall. Yeah. Thank you for tuning in. A little bit daft, but that's not going to happen.
Before we go on to trivia, which I'm assuming we're about to do, we've had a question come in.
We've had a what?
We've had a question come in on Blue Sky from Babatunde, and he reminded me this morning, so I want to ask this because he's taken the time to message us twice. He says, one for the pod next week. Does the African Cup of Nations coming up this winter not mean that some of the targets need to be seriously looked at? Brian and Burma would be a great buy, but do we want to be losing them for 6 weeks over our busiest point of the season?
I think sometimes, given the talent of the player, it's just something you accept, isn't it? You look down the years of the Premier League and all the talented players that have lost that competition for weeks on end, but they come back, or prior to going away, they score a boatload of goals. It's not ideal, but it's something I think you just put up with, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, just a quick list of some of the players that will be at the African Cup of Nations should their countries qualify. Salah, Kudus of West Ham, Onana from Manchester United, that's probably a good thing for them. Basuma of Tottenham, Adingra from Brighton, Semenyo, Bournemouth, Alex Iwobi, Jordan Ayew, Out-Nuri from Wolves, Calvin Bassey. I mean, there's a lot of Premier League players could be missing. So Olaraina, one of my favourites. So yeah, I think it's just something. Clubs know what they're getting when they're signing these players, don't they?
Well, I've just checked that email address, which is the EIB wpodcast@reachplc.com, and we've got 2 questions who've just been sent in as well. We've got Christian saying, love the pod. Why can most other clubs modernise and move their grounds? But when we talk about moving ours, it's all centred around tradition, legacy, change in culture. What is different with our legacy compared to Arsenal, Man United, Man City, Leicester, Tottenham, Brighton, Everton? They've all moved or will move their grounds. What makes us so special that we cannot? Why are we different? The same goes for the crest. All clubs update and change. Why do we resist? I think he's pretty nailed on what he wants to happen.
I think, look, I can't pretend to know exactly what Arsenal fans felt in 2005, but there was so much uproar leaving Highbury. I'm sure a lot of fans didn't want to leave White Hart Lane. West Ham fans definitely didn't want to leave Upton Park. I don't think Newcastle are alone in wanting things to stay the same. No one likes change. So, look, there's always going to be negativity or pushback against some of these changes. It's the crest. It's huge. It's, people love it. It's, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But I think on this occasion that there is reasons to.
And Isaac has emailed in.
Alexander?
No,
Does he explain why he's off the boil, so I don't have to answer that question again for the
I think we made this joke 2 weeks ago. So apologise to Isaac. He was a gentleman who emailed in a couple of weeks ago about the need for a new midfielder, and he's come back and said, since I last emailed him, we've had a couple of games without Joe Linton. So has your opinion changed? Because he stressed a couple of weeks ago that he feared Newcastle wouldn't go for another top midfielder in the summer to challenge and support the current first team three. We both said we didn't think it was a priority. He's come back and said, has your opinion changed now? Not particularly. I think actually you saw the way they set up yesterday. Didn't necessarily need a third midfielder, especially in the second half. I can understand it, but I think they have to be really, really precise in what they go after this summer. It's going to be a big window. We're going to see some big players signed, but it's not going to be a free-for-all. It's going to be probably 3-4 at most. You probably see, I think you might see 3 big players signed and then 2 that maybe underwhelm slightly, or you've got to really trust Eddie Howe. Look, I don't think they're going to spend big on a midfielder. I respect your opinion, Isaac, but I can't see that happening.
I think a lot of it depends, doesn't it, on the futures of Joe Willock and Sean Longstaff. I think if either of them or both of them do go, which I suspect both probably won't, obviously then there becomes a void to fill and a need to maybe bump that up the priority list. Lewis Miley, Eddie Howe insists, is part of the future. He's a pivotal role to play. The 3 that obviously play week in, week out, Joel included, aren't going anywhere, hopefully. So I think a lot of it depends on the outgoings for me.
Yeah.
Jacob Ramsey, an interesting one, though. A player who can play in that role.
Yeah, one to watch. David says, a round badge with a Magpie Castle on Tyne Bridge would be lovely. Geordie Dan says a new badge seems quite apt. Niall says, and Burmo would be too much, I think, if we need 5 or 6 players for Champions League. Marcher says, can you see us keeping Barnes and Gordon? Neither seem happy to play second fiddle to there. I think we keep both of them. I think while they both want to play on the left, I think they're up for alternating flanks. So no worries there. As Geordie Dan says, it's competition and depth. Trivia?
Yep. Got a good one this week. So players that have played for Chelsea and Newcastle, we have got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
I'm just going to get 12. I'm going to get the first guess out of the way. Chris Wood.
No.
That's a joke.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, no Chris Wood this week for a change.
Tarek Van Aanholt.
Yeah. Okay, we're straight in now.
Straight in, right? See, I start quite confidently and then I fall away. Like Remy.
Yeah.
Denver Bar.
Yeah.
How many did you say there were?
There's about 9 left. 9 or 10 left. Including 2 that are currently in this Newcastle United squad.
In this Newcastle United squad?
I can't believe you haven't got them. One signed from Chelsea.
You're looking as like I'm an idiot. Lewis Hall.
Yeah.
Played for Chelsea. Come on.
But no, come on. He played yesterday.
He played yesterday. Midfield. No, in defence. I can't think. Do you live Memento?
That's the one.
Yeah, you forget he played for.
No, you don't. He played for Chelsea for years. So
okay.
That
but yeah, he's only 20 or 21.
Right, we're down to the last 7, and they're all a little bit
before your time.
No, they're of my time. They're just not recent. So the most recent one was 2018 season on loan. He missed a penalty on my birthday.
Kennedy.
Yep, Kennedy.
Sparrow, didn't he?
Yeah, and then we go to a similar era. 3 players that played in the same era. One of them is a manager, just got promoted to the Prem.
Scott Parker.
That's the one. Similar era, midfielder, won the league with Mourinho's Chelsea.
Ooh.
Winger, Irishman.
Damien Duff.
That's the one.
Imagine if he'd been any good at Newcastle.
Newcastle United captain between 07 and 09. Also played for Mourinho at Chelsea.
Ooh. So he moved to Chelsea. 07, 09.
Says Chelsea.
Oh, Jeremy, see now, because he
That's
moved
the
to, he
one.
went
Yeah.
Chelsea then Borough, didn't he?
And then we're into a similar era. Played for Chelsea 97 to 04, again under Mourinho, then 04 06 under Souness. Left back.
Bobby
That's the
Raro,
one.
Christian Atsu.
Yeah, he wasn't on that list, but yes, Christian Attu's correct. I don't know why he wasn't on that list. And then we'll go 2 in the 90s. A Frenchman, played 42 games for Newcastle.
What position?
I want to say defender. Midfielder.
No. He played for Chelsea.
He did. One season in 97. And then we have, in the 90s, GP.
Gavin Peacock. Oh, I haven't met. Of course, I should have got Gavin Peacock.
And yeah, I don't know why Chris Natsu wasn't on that list, but yeah.
Well, that's,
Sack the trivia, man.
At least there's no Chris Wood on that one. Thank you, ladies and gents, for tuning in. It's a pleasure, as always. Thank you to Crown Trade and NordVPN for sponsoring the podcast. The relevant links will be in the podcast description box. Please do remember to hit thumbs up, give us a rating and review on the audio-only platform as well. I'll be back later this week with Sam, then Gibbo, then looking ahead as well to the Arsenal match. So watch out for those episodes dropping later in the week. Me and Aaron will be back next Monday, hopefully celebrating 3 points and
Definitely celebrate
Champions League
3 points, man.
qualification.
Champions League
Look at
qualification.
that. Love it. Enjoy the rest of your week, ladies and gents. Enjoy the sunshine. Pray for a bit of rain for your gardens. And we'll see you guys.